I suppose we better get started. Hello, welcome to this election debate, and I'm glad you've all found it, unless that is you were looking for the rock choir, which is just round the corner. You can leave now if that was what you were really intending to get into. It's sponsored and organised by Buzz Magazine, and I think we've got to give many thanks to St Bartholomews School for providing these fantastic facilities for you. I looked on the school's website earlier today, and it says the school has a philosophy of enterprise and a clear vision for the future. So I think we ought to get the headmaster along at the end to tell us exactly what's going to happen on May the 7th. That will be a real insight. There are, of course, difficulties with having 8 candidates. Well, we've actually got 7 at the moment because one has not yet turned up, but I think we ought to get started anyway. Because even if we give 2 minutes each, that's a quarter of an hour to answer one question. And we had a lot of questions sent in, so we selected those we think are going to be the most appropriate. But I'm also going to try and take comments from the floor as well, and we do have some microphones to come round and to get you to give us your question or comment. And we'll try and get in as many as possible, but we do have to finish by 7:30. So an hour and a half's worth of free entertainment this evening for you as we get our candidates to explain their position. What I'm going to do when we get to the questions is to call out the name of the person who's put the question, and we'd like you to read out your question to the candidates from the sheets that we've circulated as well. Let me just say, to get us underway, that I'll introduce each candidate and then pose the greatest challenge you can ever make to a politician to summarise in 60 seconds their political philosophy. So, let's crack on, and I'm going to start out on the far side over there with Paul Field. Let me tell you a little bit about Paul. Paul is the Green Party candidate. He lives in Thatcham, and he has done for 14 years with his wife and daughters. He's been a teacher for 20 years and is currently head teacher in a West Berkshire primary school. Before studying to become a teacher, he lived in Denmark for 4 years. Paul Field is a vice president, I understand, of Newbury District Primary Schools Football Association, so a football fan as well. Is that right? Yes. Well, 60 seconds starting now, Paul. Tell us what your political philosophy is, or what you want to achieve if you're elected.
Thank you. Am I close enough to this now?
Yeah,
is it
I think so.
Good evening. My political philosophy is based on a belief and understanding that the current system that we live in is broken and is not working and is fundamentally unjust. There you go. And there is no time like now. Now is the opportunity for us to start fixing the situation, to take more responsibility for the members of our own communities, and to take a more positive and environmentally intelligent approach to our position globally as well. I think a lot of our problems come from a lot of our behaviours, and if we improve our behaviours, you never know, we might improve our outcomes.
Thank you very much indeed, Paul. Next, Richard Benyon, who qualified as a chartered surveyor originally, I understand, Richard. You're now, though, a local farmer and businessman. You fought and won the Newbury seat for the Conservatives in the general elections in 2005 and 2010, and you're defending a majority of over 12,000, and you were a minister in the Department for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs as well. So, 60 seconds for you, please. What's your political philosophy? What do you want to achieve?
Well, my first ambition in politics was to represent Newbury, and I failed twice and have won twice. And I'd hoped if I was up against David Rendell this time, it would be the decider. But I suppose that if you're looking for my core philosophy and what my party stands for, it's first for those who aspire to things that are better in life. And that might be to be skilled better to do a decent job that they might dream of. It might be to own their own home. It might be to prepare themselves and their family to have a more comfortable old age, or it might just be to live in a cleaner, greener community. But all of that needs to be balanced with a society that is fair, where the richest pay more, and that is compassionate. And you can only provide for a welfare system and a healthcare system if you have an economy that can afford it. And so it's balancing that aspiration with the kind of societal changes that we want to see for the challenging years ahead.
Richard, thank you. Next is Catherine Anderson from Burfield, who's the UKIP candidate. Catherine graduated in languages and philosophy at King's College in London, and she believes she can bring a wealth of experience from previous roles in fundraising, events, business-to-business marketing, managing people and project managing from various charities. She works as a charity project manager and speaks German and Hindi. So, Catherine, a minute from you, please.
Right. I joined UKIP because I'm passionate about democracy. And only UKIP offers positive, real change that's based on common sense policies which come from listening to people. The other parties are very similar on lots of issues, for example, membership of the European Union. I've lived and worked in Europe, I'm a fan of EFTA, but we don't need to be governed by the EU in order to do business with them. Only 1 in 10 British businesses trade with the EU, and yet they're stifled by thousands of EU regulations. I'd like to see direct democracy, petitions, the ability to recall your MP. As Mark Reckless said, we are more than a star on someone else's flag. Our manifesto is fully costed. It's the only manifesto to have been independently assessed by an economic think tank. And so we're the only party with the money. We're going to take the axe to politically correct spending programs and vanity projects like high-speed rail, which is what people are saying they want. So we're the party of lower taxes, the NHS, defence, political reform, controlling immigration, protecting our countryside, and hard-working men and women.
Catherine, thank you. Judith Bunting is the Liberal Democrat candidate. She was the first girl from her local school in Peterborough to go to Cambridge in 25 years. She took a science degree and then progressed to a career with the BBC, which included Tomorrow's World and Horizon. Judith first came to the Newbury constituency in the 80s when directing a film for the BBC about villagers who had to sweep sewage off their kitchen floors every time heavy rain fell. Not much of an introduction really, Judith, but I hope you've found better things to look at since you've been here. Let's have your 60 seconds, please.
Hello, I am a householder in Newbury. I'm a professional, I earn a living, and I've been a mother. I've had kids, and they've both paid tuition fees as they've gone through university. In government, we've passed some of the most socially democratic policies that this country's seen for a generation. Now, the edge has been taken off them by the fact that we've been fighting such terrible financial crisis. But by reforming tax, which I'll tell you more about later, reforming pensions and funding schools properly, we have embedded differences that will make this country better. And their policies, many of these parties are taking up and taking forward because they also understand that they're reasonable changes. As Richard said, it's not that long since we had a Liberal Democrat MP in this area, although I'm not sure that was the point he was hoping to make. I don't believe that Lib Dem values of tolerance, compassion and fairness have died out here. And I do believe that people will come back to us now they've seen the good work that we can do in government. So if you agree with me, if you agree that we need a free, fair and open society in our constituency and in the country, then I ask you to stand with me on May the 7th.
Thank you. We're doing terribly well with our 60 seconds at the moment, so let's carry on in the same vein. Peter Norman next is the Apolitical Democrats candidate. Peter has many years' experience in the business world, having worked first in the reinsurance sector before becoming a management consultant on business development. In 1988, he set up a corporate finance boutique and later co-founded and was commercial director for a technology company in mobile data that grew to over 120 employees and went on to float on the stock exchange. He's currently a governor here at St Bartholomews School. He's also standing for the Falkland ward at the district council elections. Peter, let's have your 60 seconds, please.
Okay, the reason I'm standing is not because I believe I'm going to win this general election, but it's because I believe that party politics is broken. And it's broken for a number of reasons, but the most profound reason is that it doesn't allow for rational debate. What you have instead is party dogma, which is, I think, is a poor way of reaching sensible decisions. And I'll give you some examples of where this doesn't work. We're not addressing the big issues of the day. Today is Earth Day, and I haven't heard any of the political parties talk about climate change. To me, that is scandalous. There's a report out by scientists saying we have until 2020 to get our act sorted out if we are to prevent the climate going over 2 degrees warmer by 2050. It's not happening, we're not debating it, that's why I'm standing.
Okay, Peter, thank you very much indeed. Johnny Roberts is the Labour candidate. He's 27 and lives in Newbury with his wife Adriana. He grew up in the Buckinghamshire town of Aylesbury, and studied film at university in Newport in Wales. From the age of 15 and right through university, he worked part-time for Sainsbury's. I'm sure I saw you at the checkout, Johnny. He's now a senior manager for a conference company. Johnny, your 60 seconds, please.
My party's philosophy has always been that power, wealth and opportunity should be in the hands of the many and not just the few. Now, I know we did a lot of great things towards those goals in the 13 years we were in power, but we also did a lot of things wrong, and we also didn't achieve a lot of the things we wanted to. Now, under Ed Miliband, our party's changed. Being kicked out of government does that to you. It shakes you up, it makes you listen. And one of the key things we've changed on is that we're really focused now on building an economy that works for everyone, ordinary people, because we don't believe in the philosophy that's been followed too long by too many parties, including our own during those 13 years, that wealth was somehow created only by an elite few whom we should all be grateful for giving us a job, but that actually wealth is created by all of us who work hard and contribute to our society and our economy. That's how wealth's created, and it should be rewarded fairly so that we can all get on and we're not just struggling to get by while the rich soar off into the distance. Now, me, I'm 27, that makes me quite young, I appreciate, but I think what I bring to this election is a long-term perspective on everything. So on every issue, on every policy, I want to be looking at it and saying, yes, does it work in the short term? Does it deal with some short-term problems we've got? But what are the long-term impacts of those policies? I'll talk more about that as we go through each policy, but I want you to know that I'm dedicated to Newbury, I live here, I'm starting a family here, and I want to see long-term policies that make Newbury better and Britain better too. Thanks.
Johnny, thank you. Finally, Barry Singleton, who is standing with the credo, Spoil Party Games. Barry retired from a small manufacturing business, which he co-founded and worked in for over 30 years, the final 20 in Newbury. Barry is the honorary secretary of the Newbury Poets Workshop and delivers his poems at Ace Space and the Corn Exchange. He says, in the area of artistic expression, Newbury is blessed. Would its politics were as laudable. Barry, your 60 seconds, please.
Thank you. Yes, certainly Buzz Magazine has blessed me with the credo, because the credo doesn't normally appear, certainly doesn't appear on the voting paper, and yet a good credo is worth 1,000 words. So, hear me, spoil party games. They go to Westminster and they play games. This has already been covered. And it's pernicious. Party politics are pernicious. They affect all of us as fallout. We are not governed. They play games and we suffer the consequences. There is a book you can read called The Blunders of Our Governments. It starts with Margaret Thatcher and the poll tax, and it works its way through, and it's costed blunders. Spoil party games. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. I like the way you're being generous with your applause and everyone's getting a round of applause. It's a good way to start, I think. But we have our first question now straight away. Ian Waters. And Ian's down here if we've got a microphone for him. And we do have some microphones, I think.
Really, it's running.
And Ian, can we have your question, please?
Yeah, my question is, where will your party get the money from to invest in the National Health Service?
Johnny Roberts, let's start with you, for no particular reason.
Well, we've been clear that the 2.5 billion that we're going to put forward almost immediately comes from three main sources. A tax on homes worth over £2 million, closing some loopholes on hedge funds tax that was opened up under this government, and also a new windfall tax on tobacco company profits. And what that's going to be invested in is 20,000 more nurses so that we can get fair and proper ratios on the wards, 10,000 new GPs so that we can guarantee you a GP appointment within 48 hours, and also we're going to put cancer diagnostic equipment in those GP surgeries so we can guarantee you cancer test results within 7 days as well, so we can improve our pretty terrible statistics on cancer survival rates as well. And we're going to use it to fund 5,000 home care workers so we can integrate social care into the NHS properly, so we can deliver more care at your home, which is both better for older people because it's preventative, so we get less A&E squeeze at one end and less A&E squeeze at the other because there's less of this bed blocking going on at the other end. And also 3,000 more midwives, which will mean a midwife for every pregnant mother.
Thank you very much indeed, Johnny. Paul Field, let's go to you next on this one.
Yeah, thank you. Fundamentally, we have to accept that this is a very wealthy country and there is a lot of money. It's our money. We made it, and we should have the right to decide how we spend it. That money shouldn't be left in the hands of remote, nameless and unaccountable corporates and a very, very small amount of very rich people hiding it away so deeply that sometimes even they can't find it. So I think if you have a philosophy and the courage as politicians to go and actually demand our money for our needs, then I think you create an enormous amount straight away. You obviously, in our manifesto here, as in every manifesto, there's a fully costed budget plan which is as useful or as useless as any other party's in terms of its largely made up numbers that everyone's going to be talking about now because it's all guesstimates about what's going to happen. But if you actually aggressively tax those people that have got more than enough, you create an enormous amount of wealth. What I also do, of course, if you follow the green philosophy, you create a more positive and healthy society. So not only do you release funds immediately to invest in the services that we so desperately need, not only can you achieve that, but you also work significantly, seriously, and with real intent to reduce the demands for the generations to come. So you reduce NHS bills in the future. And of course, the final thing you do is you stop the creeping privatisation of the NHS, which is hemorrhaging tens of millions of pounds a day into the pockets of private companies, and you actually reform the National Health Service into what it was, what we all actually want it to be, and there you go.
Okay, Judith Bunting.
We were the first party to pick up Simon Stevens' recommendation. Simon Stevens, who I believe is an old boy of St Bartholomews School, rather interestingly. But his recommendation that the NHS needs £8 billion put into it to stop the rot, as it were. This is preventative measures to make sure that we maintain good health across our country. Now, we can't afford that all next year, so we've committed to £2 billion next year and increasing it up to £8 billion by 2020. And that money comes from first of all, from closing tax loopholes. We've already raised £30 billion in the last 5 years, and we've already identified other tax loopholes which are closable, which we can draw in and make £6 billion out of that to pay for some of these changes. We're also looking at extending the council tax bands upwards so that we have one rule for all of us rather than the bands and the increasing bands just petering out at about the £1 million mark. If you have properties over that, then you should pay a little more, like the rest of us get used to, have got used to. We're also looking at some cuts, but they're nowhere near as large as the cuts that the Tory plans are looking at. At the moment, we expect to balance the budget by 2016-17 so that we can afford the debt repayments. The Tories are looking to do something similar, but then to continue cutting thereafter. And we're not having that. At that point, we start to invest to save. We need to invest in our country, and that also means investing in the NHS so that by 2020, we will have the funds to pay the full £8 billion that the NHS needs to underpin it and put it on a secure footing for the future. This also includes funding for mental health services. Our party has taken the lead on putting mental health services on the same footing as physical health. In the Labour years, and I don't believe this was done on purpose, this is just an unintended consequence, but targets were instated for physical health and not for mental health. And the upshot was that money got sucked across into hitting A&E waiting times and so on, and mental health was depleted. And we've tried to reverse that by putting in waiting times, statutory waiting times for talking therapies and for mental health treatments. And we've got plans to continue working on that, to improve mental health treatments and put mental health on a par with physical health, because, as Paul was saying at the beginning, if we have people with sound mental health, then maybe fewer people will need to be on benefits and more people can be in work, which will help increase the tax take, which will help fund the services.
Barry Field. Do you just want to say that this is all pie in the sky, or do you have a view on how we afford the NHS?
Oh, I have a view. Does that surprise you? One symptom of being badly governed is increasing mental and physical dis-ease across the country, expressing itself in all sorts of ways. And the NHS, as a consequence, is a sickness service. I'm not the first person to say that, but it is a sickness service. We patch up people damaged by governance, and then we stick them back into a damaged society, or a damaging society, and they come back to the NHS and get patched up again. Works awfully well. Health is a cultural matter, and we have a fags and booze culture for tax purposes.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to get Catherine Anderson for UKIP to give us her response. Where will your party get the money from to invest in the NHS?
As I said just before, we're the only party who's actually had our manifesto fully costed and independently verified. So this is an economic think tank, the Centre for Economic and Business Research, and the other parties haven't done this. So we are the only party with the money. There are 4 main areas. So firstly, scrapping high-speed rail. This is costing £4 billion. It's tearing up the countryside, and it's only getting a few people commuting 20 minutes quicker. So this would be one area. Also, reviewing the Barnett formula. This needs replacing based upon need. That would be £5.5 billion. It's currently unfair, as people in Scotland get about £1,500 each extra on public services, so that needs to be reviewed. Foreign aid, this is a slightly controversial one, but actually many people in the country feel it is too high. We would keep £4 billion from that, of course, for things like water, clean water, sanitation, inoculations for diseases, disaster relief, all those things that are vital, and the money really must get there. And we'd encourage trade as well, break down barriers to have trade. So things like fake charities. The last area is obviously European Union contributions that we make. That comes to the end of next Parliament to 32 billion. We have pledged to invest 3 billion a year in the NHS. This is to fund 8,000 doctors, 20,000 nurses, 3,000 midwives. We will keep it free at the point of use, protect it from TTIP. We've recognised mental health should be on a parity with physical health, so we're going to invest 130 million in dementia research. And lastly, hospital parking charges are wrong, frankly. People shouldn't be charged to go, so we would scrap that.
Peter Norman, paying for the NHS.
I do wish that the political parties had actually saved the trees on which their manifestos are written for what the manifestos are worth. Despite what Simon Stevens has said, I don't think the NHS is affordable as it's currently constituted. His report indicates that there's going to be a £30 billion deficit by 2020, and he's going to meet that deficit by efficiency savings of 22 billion and the rest to be funded, of which both the Conservatives and Lib Dems have said they will fund it. The Conservatives with an open chequebook, the Lib Dems, I think, at the moment with a closed chequebook. The trouble is with the NHS as it is the costs are constantly spiralling upwards. There's more of us to treat. We're an ageing population, and the treatments are getting more and more expensive as they find more and more cures. We've got to take a completely different approach if we are to make the NHS, or keep the NHS as a free at point of delivery service. And the only way we can do that is, as Barry was alluding to, we need to change to a preventative culture as opposed to a treatment culture. We need to reform our approach to health as individuals. We smoke too much, we drink too much, we drive too fast. All of these are a cost on the health service, and we've got to stop it. And I would, in answer to your question as to funding this, I would put a tax, or not a tax, I would create insurance funds from the purveyors of ill health, so the food industry, the tobacco industry, and the alcohol industry. And every time a patient comes in who is coming in because they're too fat, or they smoke too much, or they've drunk too much, then that insurance fund for that respective industry is drawn down to pay for that treatment. That way, we as taxpayers can concentrate on people who have genuine ill health through no fault of their own, or have genuine accidents through no fault of their own.
I can sense a coalition coming about towards that end of the table. I think, Richard, I've left you to last. You've had the money, you've spent the money, and you do recognise that you do still need more. Where are you going to get the money from to invest in the NHS, please?
Well, just on that last point, I think food is actually quite important to health. So you have to delineate between what is dangerous food and what is good food. And if you believe the Daily Mail, it's all dangerous, so just starve. But the question really comes down to money. And so I think you need to look at, first of all, record. Neither of the two parties in coalition had it in their manifesto that they were going to create a cancer drug fund, but they came to government realising that they had to do that, and they did it. And the government spends £650 billion of your money. And what is important to do in terms of dealing with the deficit is to prioritise. And we prioritise the National Health Service. And it is an inconvenient truth for some people in this election to try and believe that there is some vast chasm of difference between us. There is no difference between us. We all believe that the NHS should be free at the point of delivery. We all believe the NHS should remain a public service, and that the minute amount of transfer to private companies that has happened in the last 4 years is much smaller than happened under the years of Blair. So there is basically an agreement on that, and everybody believes that that there is an impending problem. Some might call it a crisis. Ageing, diabetes is now 10% of the NHS budget, and we are going to have to find the money. Well, over the last 4 years, we have increased NHS spending well above inflation. We have protected it. The only part of the United Kingdom where it's gone down is Wales, where let the Labour Party control it. I'd say trust us by what we have done. 9,500 more doctors, 6,900 more nurses, an increased budget, a cancer drug fund. And locally, look what is happening. We're getting a new dialysis service coming to West Berkshire Hospital. We're getting a new cancer treatment unit. We're getting 7% more being spent by our CCG, who are tackling these issues head on. And the question about public health is absolutely right. Now, you can have a conference about how you slice and dice the exact funding, and things will change over the next 5 years. We will suddenly discover a new emerging crisis. But I'll just leave you with this one statistic. Yes, we have missed the target on treating people who go to A&E within 4 hours, treating them so they go home, or putting them onto a ward within 4 hours. But to listen to the rhetoric, you'd think it was Dickensian somehow. The target is 95%. At the end of the last financial year, it was 94.5%. And independent, international bodies have rated our National Health Service as one of the best in the world. And that's something to be proud of, but not to shy away from the very serious problems we've got in trying to provide the kind of health service that people want in this country. So it can be funded. We've shown that through the really difficult years, the last 5 years, and we can address the Stevens requirement for this 8 billion extra over the next few years out of the £650 billion that governments spend.
Okay, any quick comments from the audience, please? Do we have the microphone? Can we just take a comment here? And is Dave Council here? Is Dave Council?
Says, trust us, but There was no manifesto commitment to the healthcare bill, which you then brought in, which introduced privatisation, which even Tories agree was a disaster.
Can I just repeat? Under the last government, and I'm not criticising them, I actually think what they were looking at was trying to do things that are best for patients. 5% of treatments and operations and activities were put out to private companies. Under the last 5 years, that has increased by 1.5%. And what has been put in place is absolutely vital. First of all, health equalities. So if you live out in the Berkshire Downs, you've got exactly the same chance of being treated in exactly the same way as you live in the middle of Newbury or the middle of Reading. Secondly, is linking social care with the health service. And that is absolutely vital, because all the preventative things that people are saying up here, absolutely right. We can prevent people from getting ill by having a good public health system operated through our local authority and good social care so people are diverted away from the health service. That is the way forward, and that was what we have implemented.
Okay, I'm going to take a comment from that gentleman in just a moment. I'm going to let Johnny respond to that. Can you just hang on one moment, sir?
Yeah, I'm on that point about, well, I'll take it both Richard's point and your point. In terms of Richard's point about the level of private use of companies in the NHS under Labour, I accept. What we did was we saw where waiting times, we couldn't get them down below targets. We didn't take an ideological approach that just said, no, we just leave people there waiting. What we said was, okay, there's some capacity in the private sector and we're going to bring them in. And what we said, it was a quick fix. All right. Now, like any quick fix, I think we got addicted to it. I'm not going to lie. I think we overused the private sector, and we've changed on that point as well. We said we'll put the NHS, we're going to reverse the Health and Social Care Act that they've brought in, because what that Health and Social Care Act is quite complicated. So not everyone knows what it does. It requires every contract that the NHS runs to go up for tender. So private companies bid against the NHS. So hospitals and wasting money on competition lawyers and glossy presentations just to run the services that they already run. I think it's ridiculous. So we're going to repeal that. We're going to put the NHS back as the preferred provider, but we're not going to take an ideological approach that just says that you will never ever use a private company if that means that people are going to wait a really long time. But what we have said is where we have to use them as a short-term fix, we'll put a cap on the profits they can make at 5%.
Okay, that gentleman there. Can you just give us your name, sir, and then your comment?
Ken Neal. If the TTIP comes in, our government won't be able to control the sell-off of the National Health Service. It won't be able to impose any punitive taxes on companies selling cigarettes, alcohol, food, fat, sugar, anything. All three main parties support it, and it's being negotiated behind closed doors in Brussels. Even the MEPs don't know what's going on because it's a corporate sellout. It's the biggest biggest attack on our democracy ever.
All right. You've challenged the three parties. Let's get the three parties to answer that. Richard, you can
imagine, Ken, that I've looked into this very carefully because you and many others have written to me about this, and campaigning organisations like 38 Degrees have got this one completely wrong. First of all, it's a transatlantic trade investment partnership, which has the potential for huge wealth creation in this country and other parts of Europe. So it's important to look at it, to enter negotiations with the United States, and that's one thing we're doing. So where are we on the NHS? There is absolutely no requirement under any of the negotiating sections so far to force US companies to come and take over services that are currently publicly managed. And we've got that in black and white, not just from politicians like Vince Cable, who wrote to everybody who asked, but also from the people who are negotiating this. And also, it's got to be ratified by our own Parliament and the European Parliament, and we will not take that step if we feel these matters are being put at risk. So I just do not understand where you're going on this.
Judith, do you want to address that point about the trade agreement and the negotiation behind closed doors, and then whatever other comment you want to make?
I think the lobbying that's gone on by 38 Degrees and Change.org and so on has been excellent, actually. I think that they've really drawn attention to an extremely worrying aspect of the TTIP negotiations. Investor-state dispute settlements are not are not contracts which are rarely invoked. At the moment, there is a huge legal case going on in Australia where the tobacco companies are suing the government because the government wants plain packaging on cigarettes. So that's the kind of threat that we're looking at. And people have lobbied us, and I certainly have taken forward that lobbying to Vince Cable and to Catherine Bearder, who is our MEP. And I've been delighted to get some reassurance from them that the EU will not let ISDS refer to the NHS. They will not let TTIP affect the independence of the NHS. And I can't name the commissioner, I'm afraid, at the moment, but the woman in charge of these negotiations at the EU has said publicly and stated publicly that she won't let that happen. If you want more detail on that, look at my Facebook site and my website, because I've been writing about it fairly regularly.
Okay, Johnny, just to answer the accusation.
Well, what we've said as a party, and I passionately believe this, and I would certainly vote in this way. First of all, on closed doors, in Europe, it's our socialist and social democrat partners across Europe who actually force these negotiations to be more transparent and are going to keep fighting for that, because it shouldn't be being done behind closed doors, because that's not democratic. On the investor-state dispute settlements, even The Economist, which is no lefty magazine, has warned that it's awful and you shouldn't have governments being told what to do by private companies or in fear of what private companies might do. Labour will not back an investor-state dispute settlement. And on the NHS, I can understand why you're concerned, because the NHS means so much to me, it means so much to all of us. I mean, so many of our lives have been saved. My life was saved when I was like 2 months old, so I understand the value of the NHS. But on that point, the NHS is more likely to be at risk if it is a health market rather than a health service. And under the Health and Social Care Act, it is a health market. That's why we've got to repeal that to safeguard our NHS as a public institution, and then we can keep it out of the Transatlantic Trade Investment Partnership.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I'm just going to get a comment from Paul, but I'm going to then move on. James Frederickson, are you in the audience up there? Okay, your question will be next, but Paul, if you want to respond to that as well.
Yes, I just wanted to jump in really to see how these two examples here that we've just been talking about reflect a lot of the disillusionment and cynicism and unpleasantness that we have in politics at the moment. That people see when there's that privatisation isn't a particular threat, that it's not going to cost us lots of money. When there are so many examples going around. Malcolm Rifkin being the most popular one, of course, at the moment for people to get aerated about, who gets £5,000 a month as a consultant. That's more than I get as a head teacher for 60 hours a week plus. He's getting £5,000 a month just for being on the board of a company that won a contract that was £7 million more than the local NHS were offering to provide. That makes people suspicious. It makes people uncomfortable, and it means that their faith in the system is undermined. And the TTIP, I think, as well. There are many things about it that are probably quite positive, but there are too many things about it, too many examples from around the world where people are very, very concerned about the power and influence of unaccountable, faceless corporations exerting power over our democracies. And that is something that I think is something we should all be very, very worried about, but not just because of the individual issues, but because of the level of cynicism and disconnection that it creates in our society.
Okay, we could take all the time on the NHS, but I'm going to move on just so that we can cover a few more subjects. James Frederickson, your question, please.
Thank you. My question is hopefully a simple one. In and around West Berkshire, what measures would your party take to provide more affordable housing?
Okay. Richard, let's start with you this time, please.
Well, there are a number of housing schemes that are coming forward, some of which are more controversial than others. My priority, like West Berkshire Council's, is that we should build as many as we can on brownfield sites, but I don't think we're kidding ourselves if we think that will do. I think West Berkshire Council, the Conservatives in West Berkshire Council in their manifesto, have a very bold ambition, which is to see 1,000 more affordable homes over the next 4 years. And a large proportion will be delivered through commercial developments and as a percentage of those. And others will have to be delivered in other and more inventive ways. I personally believe passionately we should have mixed communities And therefore, I've always been a great supporter of exception site housing in rural areas. These are developments which do not change the size or character of a village dramatically, but they do allow local people to be able to continue to afford to live in those areas. And I've been active in bringing some of those forward, both when I was on the council and since. So we have a very bold ambition as a government, if we are re-elected, to see a great many more affordable houses. When I started as an MP, I think there were 1,200 people on the combined register. That rose pretty quickly to 5,000. I think it has dropped a bit, but for every single one of those, there is a story, and that could be that they are camping on someone's sofa, that they're living with mum and dad, that there is a great overcrowding. And you cannot in politics say that we are in favour of more housing, we know there's a problem, but then to oppose every single major housing development that comes along. That is not honest. And so I don't want to see Sandalford built over. I don't want to see large parts of the green fields around towns like Newbury and Thatcham built on, but some of them are going to have to be. And they're going to have to be built because local authorities are taking the right decision.
We had a particular question, Richard, about Sandalford, the housing development there. Are you saying that you would not want to see that?
No, I'm saying that reluctantly, as the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives on the council voted for the original plan for Sandalford, I think that it is inevitable. I supported the racecourse scheme because there was going to be a large number of affordable houses as part of it. It's close to the centre of town, largely a brownfield site, and it seemed to make sense. If we talk the talk about wanting more affordable housing, sometimes it requires you to face down some strong and vocal opposition, as we'll probably hear from Peter Norman in a minute, on schemes that we want to see brought forward. And the final thing is, of course, that is to think about the people who we're trying to house and make sure that these are people who deserve a future where the most important thing in their lives will be the bricks and mortar around them, the roof over their head, and that is the base for them and their family, and it requires us to concentrate our minds, as if we're serious about getting elected, making tough decisions.
Okay, Richard Aston. Is Richard Aston here? Because he did ask the question about Sandalford. Is he here? Right, I'll come to you in a moment. If we get our microphone over there, that would be great. But Catherine, can we hear your views, please, on what your party would want to do about first-time buyers getting a foot on the housing ladder?
So some of the measures we look at are building on brownfield sites and also using empty homes, an initiative there. We also think that in the name of democracy, we should be devolving these decisions to local people. And actually, if people would prefer green spaces to be protected, if there's a local referendum with 5% signatures, then they should be able to make that decision. I think people move to Newbury for green space and fresh air, so we do have to protect the countryside. And at the same time, I do recognise if there is a need for housing, then those initiatives should be brownfield sites, empty homes, and letting local people decide.
Okay, Judith Bunting.
If you've followed my activities over the last couple of years, then you'll know I've got quite strong opinions in this area, and some of what I say won't come as a surprise. If you look around West Berkshire, we have Taysom House in Thatcham. It's been standing empty for 6 years. It's boarded up. It could take 20 families, or a new building on that site could take 20, 25 families. Everyone has agreed that it should be knocked down and something else should be built there. Council has done nothing. We have the London Road Industrial Estate. Everyone agrees this area should be developed. It should be a mix of light industry and housing. What's happened over the last 10 years while Richard and the Tory Council have been running our area? Nothing. Now, just now, something's moving. Sandalford, meanwhile, we've got 2,000 properties being built on a greenfield site. We've got 2,000 properties, not many of which, believe you me, are going to be social housing, because that is not very profitable for the developers. I've been told, well, you can't just develop the industrial area because we can't possibly afford to do a development like that. Well, how could we afford to do the Sandalford development then? How about we focus our efforts where it is needed? And how about we get proper contracts in place with developers, so we never again have a situation as in Parkway here, where we have 37 homes for which our taxes have paid nearly £1 million, and they are standing empty because the contract and the council published in the paper we made a mistake with our contract. Because the contract was inadequate, we cannot enforce it, we cannot require Standard Life to let those affordable homes. So I ask you whether you think that you've had a good administration here, and I know we're all parliamentary candidates, but frankly, if you want to change policies around here, then vote for Liberal Democrat councillors. They are standing everywhere, and they will make sure we take a more reasonable approach to local housing. Nationally, one of our main housing policies is to try and get away from the nibble that happens with building of houses around the country, to take the bull by the horns, and where people want more housing in a significant number, we will build garden cities. We get then coherent communities built, and there are a few places around the country where people are crying out for this. And we'd push forward with those, and that would take the edge off the critical mass of homeless people, or not homeless, people needing affordable homes. And the final thing before I move on, or you move on, is I would never, ever, I couldn't possibly support a policy like right to buy. At the moment, we've got about 2 million people on the Common Housing Register across the country. And you know how many houses, council houses, the Tories sold off in the 80s? About 2 million. We should have hung on to those houses. And at the moment, they are proposing to sell off more at stupendous discounts. And I think that cheats the taxpayer and cheats the people who need these homes.
Okay. Peter Norman, let's hear from the apolitical Democrats on this, please.
You might be surprised I do have a view on this. I'm not going to talk about Sandalford, actually. I'm going to answer your question about affordable housing. And I would, in the time I've got, I'm not going to actually be able to give you a very detailed answer. But if you're interested in a detailed answer, visit my website, because I have got a very detailed answer there about the whole property market. We have had a succession of governments who have subsidised the property market. They have encouraged us all to go out and buy homes, whether it's to live in or to invest. The tax subsidies which are given are stupendous. There's a statistic that if you bought a buy-to-let house back in 1996, you would have seen returns which are about 1,900% compared to equities, which you only get returns of 200% over the same sort of period of time. This has been largely stoked by two factors. One, government subsidies, as I've just explained. The other is we're not building enough homes. And we're not building enough homes because in the 1980s, Margaret Thatcher decided there ought to be a home ownership revolution, and as Judith said, encouraged people to buy their council homes. Well, the councils weren't allowed to rebuild the housing. And, whoops, I was going to show you a graph, but it's just slipped off the paper. But what the graph shows is since that time, thank you very much. The green, if you can see it, represents council house building. That is the point where the right to buy and council homes building came to an end. The blue space is what the private sector has delivered. And it's been consistent for all this time. The private sector has very rarely been able to pick up the slack, and they certainly haven't picked up any slack from the lack of local authorities building houses. So if you want affordable housing, then we actually have to get the local authorities back into the market and building affordable housing. Because I don't believe that 80% of the market rent or the market price is affordable to most young people or most of our key workers.
Okay, Johnny Roberts, please.
I I and the party both agree with a lot of the things that have been said. Garden cities are very important and part of our plans, as are tackling empty homes, where I think locally we should have opted to use the government. Well, to be fair to this government, they allowed councils to double the council tax on empty homes to encourage them to come back to the market, and this council hasn't taken them up on the offer, so that's something we'd do very locally. But in terms of how do you help people get on the housing ladder? I know what it's like. I can only afford like part buy, part rent myself because the prices are crazy. So how do you help them? First of all, you need to help people save, and we're going to adopt the Help to Buy ISAs system. But what we're going to do differently to what the other parts of the plan is, we're going to ring fence the money raised to put that into a house building fund, so that actually delivers the homes, supply and demand. We also help people save because rents are so high, it's hard to save, So one of the things we're going to do is we're going to introduce secure 3-year tenancies. So your landlord can't kick you out unless there's, very good reason, like you've been antisocial or whatever, within those 3 years. So you've got a security of tenure, but at the same time, during that time, you wouldn't be able to he wouldn't be able to raise rent, he or she, above inflation. So that gives you some real security and keeps rents down, which is also going to help us save on housing benefit as a government, but it's going to keep rents down to allow you to save with your Help to Buy ISA, hopefully. The combination of that will give you the deposits you need, which will be able to help you get on the ladder, but we've got to build the homes you need as well. And we've said that we get house building, we hope up to 200,000, more than 200,000 a year. That's not enough, and we want to go further, but we're just being realistic about it because levels at the moment are so low, partly because of the recession, partly because I don't think we've been building enough at councils and at housing association level and developers. So one of the things we'd do would make sure developers who are sitting on land waiting for the land values to increase would have to, if they got planning permission, use it or have to sell the land back. That's one way to get people building. But on that issue of building, once they're built, we're saying that councils would be able to ring fence a large element of them to say they're for first-time buyers only. For the first 3 to 6 months, depending on the need in the area, they would be for first-time buyers only. So you wouldn't have people swooping in and buying them from wherever. They're for local first-time buyers, ring-fenced, for them to get it first. And if that sells all of them, great. If it doesn't, then they go back on the open market. But that's just some of the ways that we're going to try and help people get on the housing ladder. But crucially, you might hear from Richard that the Conservatives have a plan to build 200,000 homes over the Parliament for first-time buyers. Sounds brilliant. Even better, they're going to give you 20% discount on those properties. Sounds fantastic. But what they don't tell you is how they would do that 20% discount. And it's in the small print of the policy, is that they would exempt developers from a couple of things. They wouldn't have to be energy efficient homes. I think that's bad for the environment. I think it's bad for your energy bills. They wouldn't have to make a contribution to social housing. I think that's bad for as we've heard from Peter, social housing stock is down. We need more of that. And crucially, they would be exempt from the current requirement they have, Section 106, as they call it, where you have to invest in local infrastructure and schools. So we're going to build thousands of new homes, 200,000 of them, and not build the infrastructure and the schools to support them. I think that's a disaster for the long term and comes back to what I was saying at the start. Short term sounds great, but it's rubbish if you don't deliver in the long term.
Okay, thanks, Johnny. Barry Singleton. Barry, do you want to chip in here?
Yes, I've got
please?
a quick solution for you. As I was cowering from Hitler's bombs, he was busy reducing our housing stock. The answer then was dinky little prefabs, prefabricated houses where the sections come in, built on site and so on. And the people who moved into them loved them. They'd often moved out of absolute rubbish housing that Hitler had kindly bombed into these, but then, high-tech prefabs. Now prefabs, as I'm sure Judith will know, are extremely high-tech. They're top efficiency. And now she's also fed me another idea. I want to see a garden city of Teletubby dinky prefabs. And the people will flock, I promise you.
Barry, thank you very much.
Give me the job of running it all.
We'll have a vote on that at the end, if you don't mind. Paul, I haven't forgotten you, but I want to bring in Richard Aston because he specifically asked about the Sandalford housing development. Richard, do you just want to say something about what you've heard and specifically the Sandalford housing development?
Yes, I think I get the picture, actually. I don't think we need to talk any more about it at the moment.
Oh, who's there? Sorry, I'm looking in the wrong place. Yeah. You don't want to put a further question about the Sandalford development then?
I hope you were, that's why I didn't talk about it.
Okay, Paul. Let's hear from you, please, in the Green Party.
Yeah, I think a number of the points that have been made over the last few minutes are perfectly valid. They're perfectly reasonable. Most people accept that we need to build more houses. Most people accept that brownfield sites are more desirable and the reusing current stock that's left there. But I think the problem that a lot of people have got is that we're trying to fix a problem with a broken tool, and the housing market just isn't working. And I think my personal view would be that we actually might do well to look at curing ourselves of this obsession, almost fetish-like behaviour, with the idea of you have to buy a home to be a successful person in our society. Most people want a home. They don't want an investment. They don't want something that they're going to pass on generations. They want to live somewhere safe and secure. And I go back to my own experience of living in Denmark, which was a society that functions perfectly well, thank you very much. It's a very nice, happy place. And they don't have this problem with you've got to buy a home or you've failed in this society. You buy a share within an organisation. I lived in an apartment, a lovely view, looking over Borgen, actually, if you remember the TV show. And we bought a £10,000 share in it, and we paid a small rent a month, and the community worked together to repair and to look after the place. I think we need to explore different ways of fixing a broken market rather than tinkering around with something that's fundamentally ruined.
Okay, and I'm going to take a comment if there is one. Is Neil Randell here? Because that's going to be the next question. I want to get the microphone to you ready. Is Neil Randell here? Over there. Okay, in just a moment, but a couple of comments. Peter,
I just want to come back because I was actually hoping you were going to ask about Sandalford and you didn't, which is why I didn't mention Sandalford. My opposition to Sandalford is well known, and it's well known because, not because I don't think we need 2,000 homes. Indeed, I sat through endless planning inspector hearings, which indicated not only did we need 2,000 homes, but actually we needed 5,500 homes over what the council is providing for. But that won't come clear until 2016. And if that is the case, then the defence of our greenfield sites is really going to be pretty difficult. The issue with Sandalford is not just that we're using up greenfield site, which is an environmental disaster when climate change is actually going to reduce the amount of agricultural land that we have. It's also the fact that it's just in the wrong place of town. We've got more than half of the development of Newbury's housing stock is being placed on the south side of town. It's putting enormous pressure on the A339, which we all know is the biggest polluter in the town centre. We need to change the approach, but the council, and it was very, very indicative when they went for the SHLUR, which is the housing allocation consultation, that the Conservative councillors, one by one, I was at the meeting, got up to say, yes, we support this consultation, but I'm going to fight tooth and nail to keep houses out of my district. This is NIMBYism, not what we're proposing in Sandalford, which is actually, if you're going to build 2,000 homes, we've got to sort out the infrastructure. We need a new link road around the east side of town. If you're not going to deliver that, then find somewhere else to put these homes. It's the wrong solution for the wrong place.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Quickly, Richard, back to you. You can have another.
Just two quick points. Firstly, many of my MP colleagues are very envious of me here in West Berkshire because we've got a local authority that had a plan and that went through one of the most exhaustive consultation processes of any in the history of this area and took some tough decisions but produced a plan. And many other areas didn't. And developers moved in the lacuna that was created by them not having a plan, and the wrong sorts of developments have happened in the wrong sorts of places as a result. So first of all, well done to the council for that. Secondly, just a quote, just a little point on home. I'm a great believer in the rented sector. Anyone who knows my background will know why I'm a passionate believer in providing rented accommodation for people, and I do so for people on low incomes. But here's the thing. I wish you'd have been on the doorstep with me in St George's Avenue the other night where I met somebody who had bought his house in the 1980s. And he said to me, you've no idea how it changed my life. Yeah, I completely accept it's not for everybody, but it changed his life. And he said, I suddenly felt I had something, I felt a sense of worth, and I've now got something I can hand on to my children. And you've got to be very careful not to sound sneering of that kind of thing by some of the comments that we've heard up here. Okay. It is important to people.
Okay, Richard. Judith, just want to come back again.
Thank you. I don't think anybody here has been sneering at the idea of people feeling proud of their own homes. And we all know young people who are having a problem getting on the housing ladder. At the moment, rents are so high that you can't rent and save at the same time. And we have put some policies in place, partly through the ISA that was announced in the recent budget, but also through the rent-to-own scheme that we're proposing in the manifesto, that will help young people. This isn't affordable housing or social housing, but it's to help young people get on the housing ladder, start to get there. And whilst I agree with Paul, at the moment, that we shouldn't have our sense of value bound up in home ownership, rents are so high that it makes no sense not to have a mortgage if you can afford a rent.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Let me go on to the next subject, Neil. And Neil Randell has got a question for us. Robert Robinson also posed a similar question. I hope he's here as well. Neil, let's have your question for the panel, please.
What's your views on immigration?
Okay, great. Catherine, let's start with you.
I think, well, some of you may know, some may not, because sometimes what's put in the media is not always the truth. I think UKIP has the most ethical immigration policy. Yes, we do. We would like an Australian points-based system like they have in Australia, which is fair for everyone, not just our friends in the European Union. So why should an Indian engineer not be welcome here because we'd maybe go for somebody in Czech Republic or something who's not as skilled? I think it should be based on skill and on need. And while we have our borders open to 500 million people, and many from former communist countries, this is very challenging for a small island. So I am pro-immigration, actually, but pro-controlled, sensible immigration. And I don't think immigrants are the problem here, but I think it's our system that is broken. So we want a fairer, points-based system for everybody in the world, not just for people in the EU.
Paul Field, what's the Green Party view on immigration, please?
Excuse me. We accept that there's a bit of a mess at the moment. We accept that in the short term we will need to inflict some controls, and that an open borders policy isn't appropriate at the current moment in time. We do need to ensure, of course, that any immigration policy is fair and positive towards migrants. We know that the benefits of migration to our country are huge, and we need to maintain a positive attitude towards everything that migration can bring to the country. We would, one of the things that we would do is to restrict the limits on foreign students. I think that people accept generally that what they bring to our country is fantastic in terms of money into the education system and all the other attributes that they can bring. We have to consider that we're not going to allow immigrants just because they're rich. They've had a very negative impact actually on our housing market, coming in and swooping up huge swathes of housing that we actually could have used. But I think more importantly, and looking further long term, which is something that I genuinely believe that the Green Party is very capable of doing, creating a policy, is that we need to have a look at our impact and our behaviours around the world and look at some of the causes of migration and actually realise that the majority of people that are currently struggling on the top of Africa and coming into most horrific situations that we all feel incredible sympathy for are there partly because of our role in the world. We have to consider how our environmental vandalism around the world is destroying communities and resources in other countries, and the impact that has on real human beings in other parts of the world. We have to accept that the financial structures that we have in the world are currently creating enormous injustice, inequality and unfairness around the world. That means that people just like you and I, who don't want to leave their homes, who don't want to actually leave where they come from and where everything they understand is, and have to take such treacherous, many thousand miles, years-long journey to try and get to a place that's actually gone in and taken a lot of the wealth out. We need to look seriously at that and take a more positive, grown-up perspective on what we're actually doing and to influence global conflict, global crisis in all the forms we take. If we do that, having taken some short-term measures to actually be realistic and calm the situation down, we'll actually get back to being what we want to be as a British nation, which is a welcoming, positive community that celebrates the diversity and the magic that people from all around the world can bring and share with us.
Thank you, Paul. Barry Singleton, are the parties playing games with immigration? What would you want to say about that?
Yes, they play with everything. I have to make a declaration. I don't mess around with racism, sexism, thinnism, fatism, or anything like that. I'm a differencist. And I defy anyone to debate me that they are not differencist. Look at your wedding photos. See how similar the faces are. And so on. I grew up in a country that was white, and that programmed me. If Newbury turned a different colour, I would not be as comfortable as I am now.
Okay. Johnny Roberts, let's hear your views on immigration, please.
Wow, okay. I'm going to actually ignore that and go on to actually agree with Paul on some of the things we can do externally. I think I've always believed international development money and aid is actually an investment, because actually if you help grow those economies, you're going to have less demand. And actually I think that's the same with EU policy. Actually, I don't think the EU is necessarily the problem with migration. I think it can be a solution. If we were working with our European partners instead of talking about leaving them for dead, and we were working with them to grow their economies and actually provide a Europe-wide solution to austerity, then actually what we might be seeing is less people wanting to come and work here, where we have got a growing economy now. But if they can get jobs in Spain, because there are lots of Eastern Europeans, and there's an element of racism in some of that, I think. But there's a lot of people coming here. The biggest group who've come here in the last couple of years is actually the Spanish and the Portuguese, because they can't get jobs. So we need to help those economies support themselves as well. But that said, I've mentioned racism. I don't think it's racist to worry about immigration. I think there are concerns around immigration, what it does for services. And to be fair, I think most of those people that worry about immigration are also equally worried about migration into the area, going back to the housing point. I think it doesn't matter for these people whether it's an Eastern European or a Spanish person, but it could well be someone from the north or someone from London or someone from down the road. But if they're moving into the area, they're increasing the strain on GPs and increasing the strain on housing and things like that. So we've got some policies that are there to tackle some of the worst cases of immigration, where actually the people being brought to the country, and they are being brought to the country often, are being exploited. So it's bad for them, and it's bad for our economy, because it's actually it's suppressing wages. So one of the main things that we've seen is recruitment agencies that are recruiting only overseas. That's ridiculous. Why can't you advertise a job here in the UK? So we've banned that. One of the other issues is where these companies go out and they bring people over, it's 20 or 30 at a time, cram them into a house that holds 5 bedrooms, and then what they do is they include that in their national minimum wage allocation, because you can do that, so you can offset it. So you can actually pay these people £3 an hour. That's a disgrace. So we're going to stop that. The minimum wage will be a wage sole thing. There might be exemptions for farming communities, where I know there is a sort of a value to having people on, temporarily on the farm property, but certainly it would, in principle, be solely a wage. That allows us to get rid of some of that exploitation. We'll have a national register of landlords, so we can crack down on the exploitation that's going on there. So that actually is better for those migrants who are not, maybe they won't come here now, but if they are here and they are here, they're being exploited, and that's wrong, and it's wrong for our economy as well. But I'm not going to forget about the positives. I mean, I am married to a Venezuelan woman. I understand that immigration has been positive, and if you look at a lot of the stats, the majority of migrants who have come to this country, especially in recent years from Europe, have made a net positive contribution to our society. More tax, less benefits. So actually, I don't think that's a bad thing, because it's paying for the NHS, for the schools. So I think that's a good thing. And actually, on the point of international students, when we create this hysteria around immigration that gives a very negative view of Britain at times, what you then see, like the immigration cap that they talked about, that they missed completely anyway, but by talking about that, it gave a negative view of Britain, and actually Indian student numbers, and these are people that pay thousands to come here, way more than our students pay, and they pay it up front. Their numbers have absolutely toppled down to the ground. So we need to stop this, this hysteria around immigration as an instantly bad thing, that immigration is a bad word. It is not a bad word. These are not bad people. They are just fellow human beings trying to get on in life. We need to help those that are being exploited by stopping it, and as well take heed of concerns around housing and health services as well, which we need to invest in.
Okay, Johnny, thank you. Richard, how do you propose to control immigration?
We've said about trying to reduce net immigration, which is what the question was all about. And we've done that by looking at the pull factors that bring people here. Now, we want people to come and do the trades and the other areas that support our economy that we can't find people locally to do. And our economy would absolutely fall off a cliff if we impose some sort of arbitrary cliff face on immigration numbers. So we stopped people coming here with a work permit. If they don't get a job in 6 months, they have to go. We've said they cannot access in-work benefits for over 4 years. We said they cannot remit any other benefits they may receive over time, for example, child benefit, housing benefit, back to their family in another country. Those are important factors. And I was on the Home Affairs Committee when we did a deep investigation into the then Immigration Directorate, and it was appalling. I was really sort of jaw-droppingly awful experience for me to see how a system that this was back in before the last election, and I went to Croydon, which is where it's all based, and saw a system that was really creaking at the seams. For example, there are 14,000 educational establishments in this country. And they stem all the way from Oxford and Cambridge to a language school, which could be a spurious activity above a chip shop in Luton. And it was trying to deal with those kind of frauds that they were completely inequipped to do. There were 6 people dealing with all these different educational establishments, obviously big ones, and they know about, but it was the vast majority, particularly language schools, of which nothing was done about. So we have got a grip of it. We haven't got to where we need to get. But I'll just finish by saying this. I met a couple in Newbury during the European elections a year ago, and they said to me, "Oh, Mr. Benyon, I'm sorry, we can't vote for you this time. We're going to vote for UKIP." And I said, "Oh dear, why is that?" And they said, "Well, it's immigration." So I started to prepare all the things I was going to say, and they said, around where we live, there are marauding gangs of migrant criminals who terrorize our neighborhood. And I said to them, where is this? Where is this ghetto? Where's this hellhole you live? And they said, Wash Common. And it got me thinking that actually perceptions, in my game, perceptions have to be reality. That's what they believed. And how had they got that impression? They live in an area where, for the main, migration, immigrants are only a benefit in our lives. If you go into long-term care, or if you go into hospital, or the food you eat is probably been picked by somebody who's come here because they want a job, they want to pay tax, they want to do all the things, the hard jobs that our economy needs. So I think we need a bit of balance, and some politicians are to blame, some media is to blame. I think we need a rational debate. We need to welcome the right kind of migrants. I would like to say a lot more about what's going on our southern European coast at the moment, but I haven't got time. But I would just say people traffickers are an international evil. And if ever there was a case for pan-national decision-making bodies to try and resolve that, this is one of them. Little Britain on our own, much as I love and admire her, is not going to solve problems of international mass migration. Okay, and that is why we need to work with other countries to try and resolve it.
Okay, thank you very much, Richard. Peter.
Gosh, where do I start? First of all, on the Wash Common, Richard, I apologise. It's probably my wife who's caught a Bolivian. I think, I understand what Richard's saying on the education front. The trouble is, they sent out the wrong message. And it's put off a lot of foreign students. And education is actually one of our greatest exports. It provides us with influence that we just couldn't buy with any other means. So I think we need to be very, very careful with the message we send out. I play touch rugby for my sins, and on that touch rugby squad there are Lithuanians, South Africans and French. And they're all welcome, they're all working hard. I don't see any problems with that. And I'm very, very uneasy about this notion that as an island we can pull up the drawbridges and turn our backs on the rest of the world. I think we have a moral responsibility. We, as I think Paul said earlier, we have created a lot of the problems around the world, whether it's through environmental plundering of finite resources, or it's a disastrous foreign policy. I mean, the fact that North Africa is in upheaval at the moment, we unfortunately has our dirty fingerprints all over it. And for us to turn our back on that, I don't think is acceptable. But I want to say thank you to UKIP, because I think it is right that we should have this debate. And before it's been politically incorrect to sort of talk about these sort of matters. But, and it's a very, very big but, there is a genuine problem with the open door policy towards the EU, which is not that the fact that there are people who are coming here who want to be here permanently. They're actually, a lot of them are transient. They want to come over here for the best part of their working lives, but then go home when they retire. And how do you cope with a transient population? I don't know the answer to it, is the honest answer. I don't want to turn them away, but it does create real strains on our social infrastructure, which we have to address somehow, but I don't know what the solution is.
Peter, thank you. And finally, first time round, Judith Bunting for the Liberal Democrats.
I'm going to have to agree with little bits of what quite a few people have said here, except, sorry, Catherine, maybe not you. I totally agree with what Richard was saying, that the people traffickers are evil. I cannot believe that there are people who will put emigrants, as they are on that side of the equation, onto boats with only half enough petrol, half enough fuel to get them across the ocean. We need multinational action to stop this happening. We need to find them, track them down, and put them out of business and put them behind bars. Then, turning to what Johnny was saying, we also need to... I've forgotten what Johnny was saying, sorry. We also need to clamp down on the agencies that are only bringing in from people from overseas. It's just not reasonable. That is not reasonable because it does deprive people locally of the opportunity to take these jobs. But if you're in an area like ours, where we have high employment opportunities, we have quite a lot of Europeans working here, and that's fine. We have a very low unemployment rate. It's not hurting us. So overall, as a Lib Dem, I'm glad to welcome people from overseas. I don't particularly want totally unrestricted immigration from Europe or cross-border emigration, but I'd rather negotiate that from inside the European Union with other countries who have different problems. If Romania's actually got a problem because quite a lot of its skilled people are leaving, that's not an entirely good situation either. So we do need to work together to make sure people are a little bit happier where they live. Finally, I do want to draw your attention to the fact that one of the first actions Liberal Democrats took when we went into government in the coalition was we stopped the practice of keeping children in asylum centres. This is something that Labour maintained over their full tenure, and I don't know how they could. I was extremely proud when Nick Clegg stopped that straight away. It was in the manifesto, we put it straight through. And we must never let that rise again. We must be kind to people who seek asylum and fair. And overall, let's face it, if we had the housing stock and the education and the doctors' places that we needed, then we wouldn't be having this feeling of persecution that seems to come through UKIP. And the world would be a better place. So let's work towards that. Let's fix the fundamentals, and we can tone down, perhaps, immigration along the way.
Okay, thanks very much. Catherine wants to come back briefly, please, and Johnny too.
Johnny talked about India, and we have links with India in the Commonwealth. I actually think it's quite racist to discriminate against people in the rest of the world in favour of Europe. I think that's bizarre. And the Conservatives actually broke their promise. It was immigration figures, net figures were 300,000. That's triple what was promised. This is why we're getting votes. It's one of the reasons. It's not our only policy. We've got lots and lots of policies now. We've grown a great deal. And this is why we're getting votes from right across the political spectrum. You said that you found it very bizarre, these people who are going to vote for UKIP because they're worried about crime, but you clearly aren't listening. This is why we also get votes. We actually listen to what people are saying. I went to Parliament and was on a panel invited by the Police Federation. They gave a reception, and the morale is so low there because of the cuts to police office numbers. They can barely do their job. But I'm just addressing that issue about people's concern of crime that you thought was so amusing. But crime
It's not happening in Wash Common.
It isn't being reported.
There are no gangs of migrant criminals in Wash. Trust me, Catherine. There are no gangs of migrant criminals in Wash Common.
But it is true. So the Police Federation have been saying it is true that crime isn't being reported because people know the police are overstretched and they've been cut to the bone. This is very, just sad to see morale so low here. So actually, I think if you stay in the European Union, you have to have your borders open to 500 million people. That's the fact of it. And I think there's a great myth here that if we leave, somehow we're just little Englanders, we can't have self-governing, we can't govern ourselves, and we need to be in this union. But actually, it's an absolute myth. Angela Merkel would insist upon having a bespoke trade agreement very quickly. We're always going to be importing delicious Swiss cheese and German cars and French, wine and champagne. Of course we will. And so
Catherine.
we should enter the world. But I just want to finish with a quote of Churchill on Europe. So we have our own dream and our own task. We are with Europe, but not of it. We are linked, but not combined. We are interested and associated, but not absorbed. When Britain must choose between Europe and the open sea, she must always choose the open sea.
Okay. And that gentleman there, you want to make a comment?
I'd like to take Richard to task over his marauding gangs at Wash Common. They may not be rummaging gangs in Wash Common, but other parts of this constituency, south of here, I won't name the estate itself, but there is a problem of foreign gangs or foreign communities in that area. I don't know how many you visit as you go round, but it doesn't seem to me you've got your eyes or ears open.
Well, I visit an awful lot, and I speak with a lot of policemen and policemen and women, and I can guarantee to you that what we have in this community is something.
There wasn't one Tory candidate at the Federation reception with
something
police,
that
not one turned up.
That I would really like to make clear. That we are lucky enough in this area to live in one of the lowest crime rates in Britain and one of the lowest crime rates in Europe, and we want to keep it that way. But I just have one final point for you,
very brief,
Catherine. Even the most extreme UKIP candidate wants us to leave the European Union and stay in EFTA. Yes. And if you stay in the European Free Trade Area and not in the European Union like Norway, you have to accept the movement of labour, the free movement of labour. The immigration percentage in Norway is 15%. It's 12% here. You would still have to have the free movement of labour.
Okay, Richard.
At a bespoke
Hang on, you two. I'm going to want to bring Johnny in. Just very briefly, Johnny.
Well, one thing I would take contention is the idea that it's foreign gang. I mean, there are also criminals in Newbury, or gangs in Newbury, or whatever, not on large scale, as Richard pointed out. But where there is crime, there is equally crime, if not much more crime, being done by UK nationals. So I don't want it to go down this route of foreign criminals. I think it's wrong. Anyway, on police, that Catherine does raise a good point. And you made your point. Police cuts actually in the Thames Valley, despite what Catherine said, have not actually been cut that seriously. It's a small cut in the Thames Valley police budget. We've been quite lucky at that. I don't know why that is. So there was a less of a cut for Thames Valley than there was for other areas.
I want to get one more question.
It's around 12,500 officers across the country.
Yes, but in the Thames Valley, where you're standing, that hasn't happened. What I'm saying is the scale of the cuts being proposed by the Conservatives now will mean cuts to Thames Valley Police. So if we haven't felt some of the impact of reduced police officers, we will. We're saying there'll be a shared procurement across all police forces, which can save £250 million. Part of that will go towards protecting frontline police.
Thank you, Johnny. Thank you, Johnny. Okay, and a final word on this from Judith, please.
Just
30 seconds.
A very short point that I'll make. I've been out in door to door in most estates in the south of here, in the south of Newbury, and all I can say is a community is not a gang. A community is not a gang. You can't look at... It sounded like it. Then there are individuals. I've been door to door in many of these estates and I've not heard a single report like that. I've been out with the street pastors overnight in Newbury and I've seen no behaviour like that. And I'm afraid I beg to disagree.
All right, we're going to change the subject. Debbie Chidley. Debbie Chidley, we've just got a short time now to get this question in. Is Debbie here?
Can I just ask quickly? I want to take issue with the UKIP mandate who suggested that they're the most ethical party on immigration. Just quickly, because the deportation rules in the UKIP manifesto suggest that anyone who wants to appeal against deportation must do so from their original country. This would suggest that they must do so once they've already been deported. This means anyone deporting on the right sort of, I'm going to get killed when I go home, has to do so once they're already there. And anyone who wants to appeal against it because of the terrible conditions in the country they go home to, can't, because once they get home, there's no system for them to appeal. So I don't understand how you could accuse even other candidates here of being racist against the rest of the world, and then suggest that you're the most ethical party on immigration.
Okay, you've made your point, but we're moving on. Just 30 seconds. I think you must answer that because you've been challenged.
I think you've been listening to some myths, and I have the manifesto, which you're welcome to look at. We wouldn't deport anyone legally here. We wouldn't break up families. We would never do that. That would be wrong, and I agree with you. We wouldn't have foreign criminals coming here. We wouldn't want criminals, but that is just not what's in the manifesto. It is an ethical one. It's based on points system like they have in Australia that is fair to everyone in or outside of the EU. And I would love you to have a look because that's just, you've been misinformed.
Okay. Just a final question. If Debbie Chidley is here, is she here? Are you speaking for her or something? Yes. Can you quickly give us your question? And I just want a minute, please, from each of you on this question.
Good evening. I work for West Berkshire MENCAP. What I would like to know, ask you, is what will you do to improve the lives of people with learning disabilities and also give them better opportunities within society?
Okay. What will your party do to encourage proper jobs and opportunities for people with learning disabilities? Paul Field.
Yeah, I think it's a really important question. It touches on many other aspects of things that people probably wanted to talk about this evening. I think the...
Just a minute as well, please, Paul.
Okay, sorry. It's not much time to answer quite a deep question. I think... one thing that we have seen is underfunding and a sort of a discrete lack of value for the services and the support that organisations like MENCAP supply offer. And I think that basically inside of our policies would be a very clear and positive, inclusive approach to all members of our society, offering the level of support and encouragement that they need. I'm afraid with minute, I've got no time to go into detail on it, but I would encourage you to look in it. I think it's a very supportive policy that you'll find inside.
Richard, thanks very much, Paul. Richard, very quickly, a minute, please.
Well, more schemes like I saw up at Newbury College, the 14 to 19 scheme, which accessed government money, brought in a provider, and is giving people with learning difficulties real jobs in real businesses, and you just see how their lives change. And just to look at it as a flint-eyed accountant, or whatever the phrase is, it makes sense from the taxpayer's point of view, because these people become not only well and active, they are economically active as well. So, but that doesn't suit everybody. And so my final point is that we should protect, as we have done in the past, protect disabilities and the benefits they receive, and continue to support organisations which help people with learning disabilities in the way that we have.
Catherine, can we hear your comments on that, please?
I'm very passionate about supporting people with disabilities. I actually raised funds to help build a school in India for blind orphans, and I spent some months out there working with them. So I'm very passionate about this. And I've just come from meeting with this gentleman actually at MenCap. I was just with him this afternoon. I think we do need to tackle the stigma that is there. Some policies that we have are to raise the carers allowance, raise it so they can have an extra £572 a year in their pocket. That's very important. We're putting advisors into food banks, 800 food banks, to help people really get back into work, to support people. And with things like benefits, so disability, scrapping bedroom tax. So those are just some of the measures.
Judith Bunting.
Hello, Chris. One of the things I should say, one of the first times I faced questions like this was when I went to visit the Friendship Skills Group run by MenCap. And the people in the room gave me not quite as hard a time as you're giving us this evening, but nearly. So I think that what we need to do is invest in education for people with learning disabilities so that they can have more fulfilled lives. We're not going to make everybody better overnight, but by taking the time and the patience to actually educate people and help them understand the world, then I think that we'll improve their lives. But they're not going to be able to manage on their own straight away. And over the last few years, we have already invested £400 million in trying to make life better for carers. We know there's a lot of informal caring going on out there, and these people need support as well. In the manifesto, we've also declaring that we'll put together a package of carer support which will include a bonus to allow people to have a respite break every year.
Okay, Peter Norman.
It's one of the peculiarities of an advanced society that we seem to try to shut away disabilities, which you don't get in the third world, where they take much greater care in the community of disadvantaged people. I think at the school here, we've got a great program. My house, Eva's, supports MenCap, and MenCap come out to the house productions and other things, which is great, because it means that the young meet the MenCap people, and MenCap people meet our young, and we need to break down the barriers. The Paralympics were brilliant for that, but I don't think we're doing enough to build on it, and we just need to find other ways in which we break down the barriers between people who are disadvantaged and those who aren't, so that they're more integrated into the whole community.
Johnny Roberts, what do you want to do for people with learning disabilities, please?
Well, we've got a minute, so I'll be 4 key points. One is encourage more teachers and support more teachers to take on specialist training to help with people with special educational needs. We would reform the work capability assessment system by working with disabled charities and disabled people as well on how to do that so it works fairly and takes account of things like MS, which it does terribly at dealing with. The work programme that the government has is not working for disabled people, so that we would create a new specialist work scheme, back to work scheme for disabled people. And finally, on disability benefits, we would scrap the bedroom tax, because I've met people on the campaign trail and it's really affected me that the people have said to me, I'm disabled and I've been hit by this bedroom tax, and I think it's wrong, thousands of pounds extra a year for having a spare bedroom. So we would scrap the bedroom tax, but we would also protect disability benefits. I personally, if I'm elected, would never ever vote for anything that cuts disabled people's benefits.
Okay, Barry Singleton, have you got something
I have.
pithy and poetic for us to finish on,
No,
please?
I don't go near poetry. Not when I'm out. Yes, it happens. Remembering I'm an independent, it so happens I have considerable number of years of close association with cerebral palsy and with talking cures. But being a radical problem solver, I would say this is something which, again, like my what was it, garden city with prefabs in, I would apply a similar fundamental rethink of the whole business of mental health, particularly the causes. And I've got some very radical views on that, haven't I, Judith?
For another occasion, fortunately, and we've got to draw a line under it there, and thank you very much indeed for all your questions. I've got a couple of thanks to make, actually, to Buzz Magazine for arranging this evening, and Jackie, the editor.
Yeah, yeah.
to St Bart's for letting us darken their doors. And also, can you give a round of applause for all our candidates who have come up here today and given us their views. Two more things to say. There'll be TV coverage. This has been filmed, and it'll be on the Buzz website as soon as they can upload it. And thanks to Peter Cook of Dudley Films for filming it. And it'll also be on the Kennet Radio website, which is an online community radio station. So you'll be able to listen to the whole thing again there. What a delight. There's a good Sunday afternoon's listening for you. Thank you very much indeed. And have a good evening. And I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you.